Have you ever helped a stranger just because it felt like the right thing to do, without knowing that one small act of kindness would change your entire life forever? On a stormy night in New Orleans, a struggling black waitress named Ava Johnson helps a drunk man get home safely. She thinks it's nothing, a simple act of decency. But that man turns out to be Richard Hale, a powerful billionaire with secrets darker than the night itself. If you were in her shoes, what would you do? Would you still help him? Would you risk everything for a stranger, knowing it could cost you your peace, your safety, maybe even your future? Ava doesn't know it yet, but just 1 week later, she'll wake up no longer serving tables at the old hotel. She'll own it. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a story about kindness meeting power, about courage born from desperation, and about how one woman's heart can rewrite the fate of giants. Because sometimes, the smallest choices, the quietest moments of compassion, become the spark that changes everything. So ask yourself, if life tested your kindness, would you still choose to be good? Stay with us, because this story will remind you that even in the darkest corners of the world, light can find its way through. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the rest of this incredible journey. It was almost midnight in New Orleans, the kind of night when the rain doesn't fall, it pours, like the sky is trying to wash away every bad decision the city ever made. Ava Johnson held her small umbrella close, its fabric trembling under the downpour. She had just finished her double shift at the Golden Swan Hotel, a place where chandeliers still sparkled even when the staff couldn't afford dinner. Her shoes were soaked. Her uniform clung to her skin, but she was used to discomfort. It was part of surviving. She crossed Bourbon Street, the air thick with the smell of beer, fried food, and saxophone smoke. Drunk laughter echoed from somewhere behind her. Ava just kept walking head down, quiet, invisible. Then she saw him. At first, just a shadow against a lamppost. Then the shadow moved, or rather, stumbled out into the street. A man in a dark gray suit, expensive enough that even through the rain, it looked out of place here. He tried to steady himself but slipped, landing hard against the curb. Sir Ava called out, her voice soft but firm. No answer. The man groaned. Trying to lift his head, she hurried over. The street light revealed his face, maybe mid-40s, clean-shaven, but pale, eyes glazed from alcohol and exhaustion. "You okay, sir? You can't stay out here." He mumbled something she couldn't catch. His wallet lay half open near the gutter. Ava picked it up, saw a flash of black card tucked behind the ID. Whoever he was, he didn't belong out here drowning in the rain. The man tried to push himself up. Failed. Ava slipped her arm under his and said quietly, "All right, let's get you out of the storm." He didn't resist. His weight leaned heavily on her small frame. She whistled for a cab, one of the few still running this late. When it stopped, she helped him inside. "Where to?" "Ma'am," the driver asked. Ava glanced at the man's ID again. The address printed on it was in the Garden District, where mansions lined the streets like old kings. "Take him here," she said, handing it over. The driver raised an eyebrow. "That's a long way for a stranger." "Just drive," she replied. "I'll cover the fare." Inside the cab, the world felt smaller. The hum of the heater, the rhythm of rain against the glass, the faint smell of whiskey. Ava sat next to the man, her hand hovering just above his shoulder in case he slipped again. He opened his eyes halfway, murmuring, "Why are you helping me?" Because someone should, she said simply. He let out a broken laugh. You don't even know me. I don't have to. He stared at her for a moment, then looked away. Most people just walk past. Ava didn't reply. She'd learned long ago that silence could be kinder than words. When the cab reached the mansion, the rain had turned into a curtain of silver. The driver pulled under a marble awning. Ava paid him every dollar she had from her tips that night and helped the man to the door. The porch light flickered on. A woman in a silk robe opened the door, eyes wide. Mr. Hale, she gasped. I found him downtown, Ava explained quickly. He was out cold. Just thought I'd better get him home safe. The woman nodded, half in shock. You're an angel. I can take it from here. Ava helped ease the man onto the sofa. He turned his head toward her, eyes unfocused but searching. Your name, he murmured. Ava. Ava, he repeated, as if testing the sound. Good people still exist? Huh. She smiled faintly, sometimes, and then he passed out. Ava looked around the mansion-high ceilings, marble floors, the faint scent of cedar. It was the kind of place you only saw in magazines left in the hotel lobby. The woman, his assistant, maybe thanked her again and offered money. Ava shook her head. No, ma'am. Just make sure he's okay. She left before the woman could insist. Outside, the rain had softened to a whisper. The streetlights shimmered off puddles like broken glass. Ava's reflection looked back at her tired eyes, dripping curls, a uniform that had lost its color years ago. She walked home through the narrow streets of Treem, where the smell of wet brick and gumbo hung heavy. Her small apartment waited, lights off, rent overdue. She placed the umbrella by the door, sat on the edge of her bed, and sighed. People like him lived in marble. People like her scrubbed it. But that night, she didn't feel small. For once, she'd done something right without needing applause. The next morning, the city woke to sunlight filtering through the humidity. Ava went back to work as if nothing had happened. She wiped tables, refilled glasses, laughed politely at guests who didn't see her. By noon, she'd almost forgotten about the man in the rain. Almost, sometimes, between serving tables. She'd glance toward the entrance half expecting to see him walk in, dry and smiling, to say thank you, but he didn't, and Ava told herself it didn't matter. Kindness wasn't supposed to come with receipts. That night, as she left the Golden Swan again, the air smelled like coming thunder. She paused by the same street corner where she'd found him. The lamppost still flickered, the gutter still overflowed. But for the first time, she noticed a small paper folded near the curb, maybe blown by the wind. She picked it up. It was a business card, soaked but legible. Richard Hale Enterprises. Ava frowned. The name felt familiar, though she couldn't place it. She tucked the card into her pocket and kept walking. Somewhere far behind, a car door slammed, and the echo carried down the wet street like a promise. Morning light spilled through the tall windows of the Golden Swan Hotel. The walls glowed faintly, the same soft gold as the uniforms of the staff. Ava Johnson tied her apron tighter and pushed the mop bucket toward the lobby. The scent of lemon polish mixed with the distant hum of jazz drifting from the cafe next door. She had been working since 6:00. The breakfast crowd had come and gone, leaving behind half-empty coffee cups and crumbs of pastries that cost more than she made in an hour. Ava hummed under her breath as she wiped a table. The rhythm calmed her. It kept her from thinking too much. A week had passed since the night of the rain. The memory still flickered in her mind like the reflection of a passing car on wet pavement. But she had folded it away, tucked between bills and grocery lists, something that belonged to another world. Around 10, her manager, Mr. Collins, appeared with his usual look of permanent disapproval. "Johnson," he barked, "watch the glasses next time. We lost 2 crystal goblets yesterday." "Yes, sir," Ava replied, eyes lowered. He grumbled and walked away. She waited until his footsteps faded, then whispered to herself, "We? You mean me?" She smiled faintly, shaking her head. The front doors slid open. A sudden breeze swept through, carrying with it the scent of rain and something else, money, maybe, or confidence. Ava turned, ready to greet another impatient guest. But the man who stepped inside wasn't a guest. He was the man from the rain. His suit was pressed, his tie perfectly knotted, shoes polished enough to reflect the chandelier above him. He looked like a photograph cut from a magazine, but his eyes, that same weary gray, told her he remembered. Their gazes met, just long enough for the noise of the lobby to fade. "Good morning," he said, voice steady but quiet. Ava blinked. "Morning, sir. Can I help you?" He smiled slightly. "I believe you already did." Before she could answer, "Mr. Collins appeared again, his tone instantly polite now that someone rich had entered. "Mr. Hale. Welcome. How can we assist you today, Mr. Hale?" So that was his name? "I'm actually here to see one of your staff," Richard said. "Miss Ava Johnson? Mr. Collins looked startled. Our waitress Richard's smile didn't waver. "That's right." The manager's posture changed. He straightened, suddenly nervous. "Of course. Of course. Ava, you can use the lounge for privacy." She followed Richard through the narrow hallway that led to the staff lounge, still unsure what was happening. He waited for her to sit, then took the chair opposite. For a moment, neither spoke. "Thank you for helping me that night," he said finally. "I was not myself." "You don't have to thank me," Ava said. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone," he replied. "I was told you refused money." "I didn't help you for money." "I know," he said softly. "That's exactly why I'm here." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope, the same color as old parchment. He placed it on the table between them. Ava frowned. "What is this?" "Something I hope will change your life," Richard said. "I don't mean it as charity. Consider it an opportunity." She stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. "Mr. Hale." "I don't please," he interrupted gently. "Just read it." Inside was a single sheet of paper, her name printed neatly across the top, Ava Johnson. Beneath it, a line of legal text. She read the first sentence twice before her breath caught. It was a property transfer document. Her hands trembled. "You're giving me a hotel, a small one," he said. "The Crescent Inn. It's been neglected for years. I bought it once for sentimental reasons, but it's losing money. I thought maybe someone like you, someone with heart, could give it a second life." Ava stared at him. "This doesn't make sense. You don't even know me." Richard leaned back. "That night, when you helped me, I realized something. You didn't see a billionaire passed out in the rain. You saw a man, no judgment, no agenda, just kindness. I've been surrounded by people who only move when there's profit in sight. You reminded me that decency still exists. I can't buy that, but maybe I can help someone who still has it. Ava's heart pounded. You could help in 100 other ways. Scholarships, donations. Why me? He smiled faintly. Because you didn't ask for anything. And maybe that's exactly why you deserve something. She didn't know what to say. Her whole life had been built on smallness. Small apartment, small paychecks, small dreams that didn't risk disappointment. Now, out of nowhere, the world had shifted beneath her feet. I can't accept this, she whispered. You can, he said, and you should. The documents are already signed. You just need to decide what you want to make of it. The conversation hung in the air, heavy and unreal. Finally, she asked, why give away a hotel? Richard's expression changed. Something flickered behind his eyes, a shadow. Maybe guilt. Let's just say, some things are easier to part with than to fix. He stood and adjusted his tie. I'll have my assistant send you the rest of the paperwork. You'll find the keys inside the envelope as well. Mr. Hale? He paused at the door. Yes. Are you sure about this? He looked back at her with a small, tired smile. Completely. And then he was gone. Ava sat for a long time, the paper still open on her lap, her pulse echoing in her ears. Outside the window, the clouds gathered again, the same kind that had poured over the city a week ago. She unfolded the final page of the envelope. Taped to it was a single silver key. A tag hung from it. The Crescent Inn, Chart Street. Her fingers brushed the engraving. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That evening, she walked along Chart Street, following the address printed on the tag. The rain had started again, thin and steady. The Crescent Inn sat between two shuttered shops, its sign half broken, the paint peeling like old bark. She pushed open the door. The scent of dust and damp carpet greeted her. The lobby lights flickered weakly. A desk bell sat unused, tarnished. Hello, she called. No answer. A lone cleaning lady emerged from the hallway. Startled. Oh, sorry, ma'am, we're closed. Ava hesitated. I'm the new owner. I think. The woman blinked. The new, what Ava showed her the key and papers. The woman's eyes widened. Well, I'll be damned. They said someone was coming, but I didn't believe it. What's your name? Ava asked. Maria, she said. Been here 20 years. This place has ghosts. Miss, you sure you want it? Ava smiled softly. Every place does. Maria, I just want to see if this one can still breathe. They walked through the narrow corridors, the air thick with history. Dust settled on the old piano, the cracked tiles, the faded portraits of strangers. Ava ran her hand along the wall, feeling the roughness beneath the paint. For reasons she couldn't name, she felt a strange pull, like the building was waiting for her, like it had been holding its breath for someone to listen. That night, she stood in the empty lobby long after Maria had gone home. The rain tapped against the windows, steady and soft. She looked up at the ceiling, the flickering chandelier still clinging to life. Guess it's just you and me now, she whispered. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She felt terrified but alive. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Somewhere beyond the storm, something new had begun. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds of Ava Johnson's small apartment. The air smelled faintly of coffee and rain-soaked pavement. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the papers spread before her. The title read, Property transfer agreement. The Crescent Inn. Shart Street. It was real. Every signature, every seal. She had read it a dozen times already, hoping it would dissolve into a dream. But no matter how many times she blinked, the words stayed. She was, somehow, the legal owner of a hotel. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello, Miss Johnson. This is Caroline, Mr. Hale's assistant, a brisk voice replied. I wanted to confirm that the property transfer has gone through. Mr. Hale asked me to make sure you received the management documents and the initial access codes for the system. I did, Ava said quietly. But there must be some mistake. I didn't earn this. Caroline's tone softened slightly. Mr. Hale doesn't do things by mistake. Ma'am? He said you'd say that, though. Ava exhaled, unsure whether to laugh or cry. I don't even know how to run a hotel. Well, the woman said, the Crescent Inn has a staff, or what's left of one. They'll help you, but the place needs work. Mr. Hale said it was time someone with a heart took over. When the call ended, Ava sat still for a long time, the phone resting in her lap. Outside, a street vendor's cart rattled by. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. She finally stood, grabbed her jacket, and looked at herself in the mirror. All right, she whispered. Let's see what kind of mess this really is. The Crescent Inn stood quietly at the edge of Chartres Street, sunlight creeping across its cracked facade. From the outside, well, it looked like a forgotten story, one that had stopped being told years ago. Inside, the lobby was dim, the smell of mildew and time heavy in the air. A few employees gathered when they saw her enter. Maria, the cleaning lady from the day before, waved her over. Morning, Miss Ava. Didn't think you'd actually come back. Guess I did, Ava said with a smile. Maria led her to a small office behind the counter. The door creaked open to reveal an old wooden desk stacked with invoices, folders, and sticky notes so yellowed they might crumble to dust. This used to be Mr. Carl's office, Maria explained. He ran the place for years, said he was retiring, but I think he left before things got ugly. Ava scanned the shelves. Some invoices were months overdue. Others looked wrong. Same handwriting, same vendor names, different amounts. Who approved these? Ava asked. Maria shrugged. I stopped asking questions a long time ago. Ava pulled one invoice closer. It listed a cleaning service called Brightstone Facilities, billed every week for thousands of dollars. She flipped through more. The same company, again and again. Something didn't feel right. She opened a drawer, found a ledger marked Accounts, Internal Use Only. It was half filled with scribbles and initials. At the bottom of one page was a note in a hurried hand. Ask Richard before moving funds. Her stomach tightened. Maria, do you know who Brightstone is? The woman frowned. Heard the name. Sure. The last manager, Carl, used to meet someone from that company. Always after hours. Never liked the look of it. Ava closed the ledger. Her mind swirled. Maybe Richard didn't know what was going on here. Maybe he did. Either way, the place was tangled in something. By noon, she met the rest of the small staff in the dining room, a cook named Raymond, a front desk clerk named Ella, and a bellboy barely out of high school, Elijah. They watched her cautiously, unsure what kind of boss this new woman would be. I know this is strange, Ava began, and I'm not here to pretend I know everything. I just want to make this place honest again. If you stay with me, I promise I'll fight for it. The room was silent for a moment. Then Elijah grinned. As long as the roof doesn't fall on us, I'm in. The others chuckled softly, tension easing for the rest of the day. Ava worked alongside them, scrubbing tables, sorting paperwork, wiping dust from the front desk. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. For once, she wasn't just surviving someone else's dream. Later, when the sun began to set, she stepped outside to breathe. The air was heavy with the scent of magnolia and the river breeze. She leaned against the old railing, looking down the street where the lamps were flickering to life. She felt something stir in her chest, a fragile sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Then her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. Stay out of the books if you want to keep what's yours. A chill ran through her. She looked around, but the street was empty. Only the hum of a streetcar echoed in the distance. Inside, she locked the office door, heart pounding. It had to be a prank. Or maybe someone didn't like the idea of her digging through records. Either way, fear crept up her spine like cold water. She sat down at the desk and opened the ledger again, flipping to the last few entries. At the bottom, another name appeared beside the initials T. Hale. Her breath caught. Hale, as in Richard Hale. It couldn't be coincidence. The words from their last meeting replayed in her mind. Some things are easier to part with than to fix. Maybe he hadn't given her a gift. Maybe he'd handed her a problem he couldn't face. Ava pressed her palms against the desk, fighting the knot of anger and confusion tightening in her chest. Why me? She whispered to the empty room. What am I supposed to do with this? No answer came, just the faint buzz of a dying light bulb above her. When she left that night, she made sure to double-lock the door. The rain had returned, soft but constant. She walked home through the narrow alleys, the sound of her footsteps mixing with the rhythm of the storm. She thought of Richard, of his quiet eyes, and the way he had looked at her like someone who'd already lost something he couldn't name. Maybe he was sincere. Maybe he wasn't. But now she was tied to whatever truth he carried. At her apartment, she sat by the window and watched the rain streak down the glass. Below, the city moved on, people laughing, traffic hissing, music rising from a distant bar. She wondered what her mother would have said if she were still alive. Probably something like, "Don't let rich people make you their project. Baby, they don't save you. They test you." Ava smiled faintly. "Guess I'm taking the test. Mama." Her reflection stared back at her, tired but alive. She whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, I find out who Brightstone really is." And though fear lingered in the air, a quiet resolve began to build beneath it, steady, patient, like the slow rising of dawn. She didn't know it yet, but the deeper she searched, the closer she would come to the truth that could ruin them all. The next day began with a low hum of ceiling fans and the smell of stale coffee. Ava Johnson arrived at the Crescent Inn before sunrise, the sky outside still painted in shades of gray. She set her purse down behind the counter and took a deep breath. The air was damp and cool, heavy with the faint scent of mold and dust. She walked through the lobby slowly, listening to the soft echo of her steps on the worn tile floor. Each sound reminded her that this place was hers now, every creak, every cracked mirror, every unpaid bill. But it also carried secrets, the kind that made her stomach twist whenever she looked at the old filing cabinets. When she reached the office, the door was ajar. She remembered locking it the night before. Her hand froze on the handle. Inside, the papers on the desk had been disturbed. The ledger she'd left closed was now open. Pages turned. Ava's heart quickened. She checked the drawers, nothing missing. But the files were shuffled, as if someone had searched through them in a hurry. She scanned the room, her breath shallow. The window latch was broken, the frame slightly bent. Whoever had come in hadn't bothered with the front door. She called out, "Maria." No answer, only the quiet hum of the old air conditioner. Ava backed out slowly, closing the door. She grabbed her phone and took a few photos of the disordered desk before sitting down in the lobby, trying to calm herself. When Maria arrived half an hour later, carrying a basket of cleaning supplies, Ava greeted her with a shaky smile. "Maria, did you come in last night?" The older woman shook her head. "No, ma'am." "Why, someone's been in the office." Maria frowned. "You sure it wasn't the wind? These windows don't lock good." "It wasn't the wind," Ava said. "The ledger was open. Someone's been going through the accounts." Maria's face grew serious. "Miss Ava, maybe it's time you change those locks." "I plan to," Ava said, though she wasn't sure who she trusted to do it. Later that morning, she called a locksmith, then turned her attention to the records again. She started matching the Brightstone invoices with the payment logs. The numbers didn't add up. Some payments had been double-charged. Others transferred to secondary accounts she didn't recognize. Around noon, Elijah walked in, his shirt half untucked and a notebook in hand. "Hey, Miss Ava, you wanted me to look at the online system." "Yes," she said, gesturing him over. "See if you can find where these payments are going." He leaned over the computer, fingers tapping quickly. After a few minutes, he frowned. "That's weird. These invoices are supposed to route through Hale Enterprises' maintenance department, but the system redirects them to a private account, not even company registered." "Can you trace it?" she asked. "Not directly. It's masked, but it's tied to a company named Vantex." Ava's pulse skipped. "Vantex. Yeah," Elijah said. "Ever heard of it?" She shook her head slowly. "No, but I think I'm about to." He looked at her, uncertainty in his young eyes. "You think this has something to do with Mr. Hale?" Ava hesitated. "I don't know, but someone doesn't want me looking into it." The boy lowered his voice. "Miss Ava, if this is serious, maybe you should walk away. Some things aren't worth the trouble." She gave him a faint smile. "Maybe not, but lies like these don't stay buried forever." He nodded, still uneasy. That evening, when the others had gone home, Ava sat alone in the office again, the faint glow of the desk lamp flickering on her papers. She thought about Richard Hale, the way he had avoided her eyes when she'd asked why he gave her the hotel, the heaviness in his voice when he said some things were easier to part with than to fix. She wondered if the Crescent Inn had been his way of erasing something, or someone. As she sat there, the phone rang, breaking the silence. She answered cautiously. "Hello," a low male voice replied. "You should stop digging." "Miss Johnson." Ava froze. "Who is this someone giving you a chance to stay safe? What do you want?" "What we all want," the voice said. "To keep things quiet. Close the books. Miss Johnson, let it die." The line went dead. Ava stared at the phone for a long moment, her fingers trembling slightly. The words echoed in her mind. "Close the books." She turned off the lamp and walked outside. The street was dark, the air thick with humidity. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, low and slow. The next day, she decided to confront Richard. She took a cab to the Hale Enterprises building, a tall tower of glass and steel that seemed to touch the sky. Inside, everything gleamed: marble floors, chrome elevators, receptionists who smiled like machines. Caroline, the assistant, looked surprised when Ava arrived. "Miss Johnson, I wasn't expecting you. I need to see Mr. Hale," Ava said firmly. "I'm afraid he's in meetings all day." "I'll wait." Caroline hesitated, then sighed. "Have a seat." Ava sat in the lounge for nearly an hour before Richard appeared, flanked by two men in suits. When he saw her, he stopped. "Ava, I need to talk to you," she said. He dismissed his companions and motioned her into his office. The room was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "What's going on?" he asked. Ava pulled the ledger from her bag and placed it on his desk. "This and this." She spread the invoices across the glass surface. Brightstone, Vantex, fake accounts. Someone stealing from your company, or they were. Through the Crescent Inn. He looked down at the papers without touching them. "You shouldn't have these." "I own that hotel," she said, her voice rising. "You gave it to me." "Yes," he said quietly, "and I thought that would be enough. Enough for what?" He sighed and turned toward the window. "I didn't want you caught in this. Caught in what he didn't answer right away." The silence stretched. "Mr. Hale?" she pressed. "What are Brightstone and Vantex?" He turned back to her, his expression dark. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me." He hesitated, then said, "They're shell companies. My brother created them years ago to move money off the books. I tried to shut them down, but—" He trailed off, rubbing his temples. "It got complicated. I was supposed to clean it up quietly. Giving you that hotel was supposed to be a way to close one chapter without drawing attention." Ava stared at him. "You gave me a hotel tangled in fraud to hide your company's mess." His voice dropped. "It was never supposed to touch you. I just thought," she cut him off. "You thought what? That I'd be too grateful to ask questions?" He met her eyes then, something raw in his expression. "I thought you were the kind of person who could bring life back to something dying. I just didn't realize how much death there was in it." Her chest ached. "You should have told me the truth. I wanted to," he said, "but I didn't know how." Ava gathered the papers. "Well, now I do. I'm not covering for you or your brother, whatever this is. I'm finding out—" "Ava, don't," he said sharply. "You don't know what you're dealing with." She walked to the door. "Maybe not, but I know what silence costs." He called after her, but she didn't look back. Outside, the afternoon light had turned the sky copper. She stood on the sidewalk, the papers clutched to her chest, feeling both small and unshakably certain. She wasn't just cleaning up someone else's mistakes anymore. She was walking straight into them, and this time, she wasn't afraid. That night, the city of New Orleans breathed in silence. The rain had stopped, leaving the air damp and heavy. Neon lights shimmered across puddles on the cracked pavement. Ava Johnson walked home with her coat pulled tight, her mind turning over the words Richard Hale had said to her earlier that day. Shell companies, money off the books, my brother. Each phrase echoed in her thoughts like footsteps in a tunnel. She wanted to believe that Richard wasn't lying, that maybe he had tried to fix it quietly. But the fear in his eyes wasn't the fear of guilt, it was the fear of exposure. Back in her apartment, she placed the ledger on the kitchen table and stared at it under the faint glow of the lamp. The book looked so ordinary, yet it held a map of corruption that stretched far beyond her understanding. She poured herself a cup of coffee, though her hands were trembling too much to drink it. Outside, a dog barked, then silence. She opened her phone and searched Vantex Group New Orleans. No website, no public record, but she found a short line buried in an old business listing: Vantex Group LLC, dissolved, registered under Thomas Hale. There it was. The connection. Her stomach tightened. Richard hadn't lied, but he also hadn't told her everything. She grabbed her notebook and began to write names, dates, transactions, every Brightstone invoice she could find, every account number. The deeper she went, the more she saw how big the web was. It wasn't just one hotel. Brightstone and Vantex had bled money from several properties under the Hale Enterprises umbrella. She leaned back in her chair, exhausted. "What the hell have I walked into?" she whispered. At that moment, her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. A chill crawled down her spine. She hesitated, then answered, "Miss Johnson." The same low male voice from before, calm, controlled. Ava's grip tightened. "Who are you? I warned you once," the voice said. "You didn't listen. If you're trying to scare me, it's not working." The man chuckled softly. "You sound brave, but bravery is fragile. People who dig too deep don't get to see daylight for long. What do you want?" "To help you understand your limits. Leave the Crescent Inn's accounts alone. Enjoy the gift you were given. If you don't, you'll lose more than a hotel." The line clicked dead. Ava sat frozen, phone pressed to her ear long after the call ended. Her pulse raced, but beneath the fear, something else began to rise, a quiet, burning anger. She stood, paced the room, and whispered to herself, "No one gets to threaten me for doing the right thing." Sleep didn't come that night. By morning, she was back at the Crescent Inn, running on caffeine and determination. Elijah was already there, setting up the front desk computer. "Morning," he said, yawning. "Morning," she replied. "Did you sleep?" He shook his head. "Not really. I was thinking about what we found." "Good," Ava said, "because we're not done." She showed him her notes. "Vantex isn't just a shell. It's connected to multiple properties. I think they use these small hotels to move money under the radar." Elijah frowned. "You're saying it's laundering. I'm saying it looks a lot like it." He swallowed. "That's serious. Miss Ava. Like, federal, serious. I know." Before he could respond, the door creaked open. Maria entered, carrying a basket of fresh towels. She noticed the tension instantly. "Something wrong?" Ava smiled faintly. "Just numbers." Maria. Always the numbers. The older woman studied her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Numbers don't lie, but people do. Be careful which one you trust." Ava nodded. After Maria left, Elijah leaned closer. "So what's the plan?" "We gather proof," she said. "Real proof. Then we go public." "You mean, like to the news?" "Yes." He hesitated. "That's dangerous. Not as dangerous as staying silent." They spent the rest of the morning scanning documents and saving files to an encrypted drive. Elijah showed her how to copy the accounting system's backups without alerting the network. As they worked, the old elevator groaned open, and a tall man stepped out. Dark suit, slicked hair, calm smile. He looked out of place among the peeling paint and faded wallpaper. Ava straightened. "Can I help you?" The man's eyes flicked to her name tag. "Miss Johnson, finally, we meet." She frowned. "Do I know you?" He smiled. "Not yet. My name is Thomas Hale." The air seemed to vanish from the room. Elijah froze beside her. Thomas extended a hand. "I was in town and thought I'd see how my brother's little gift was doing." Ava didn't take his hand. So you're the one behind Vantex. He raised an eyebrow. Ah, you've been reading too much. You mean the fake companies you used to funnel money, she shot back. Thomas chuckled softly. You really are as clever as Richard said. What do you want? He glanced around the lobby. To make sure you understand the position you're in. The Crescent Inn doesn't belong to you. Miss Johnson. Not really. It's part of something much larger. Something you can't begin to grasp. So, let me give you some advice. Stop trying to be a hero. Heroes die broke. Ava folded her arms. Then I guess I'll die broke. But I won't die afraid. Thomas's smile thinned. You sound just like my brother when he still believed in doing the right thing. Look where that got him, half a man. Drowning in guilt. Maybe guilt's what happens when people remember they have a conscience, she said. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, anger, or maybe surprise. Then it was gone. He leaned closer. You're in over your head. Ava, walk away before you find out how deep it goes. Then he turned and walked out, leaving the faint scent of expensive cologne behind him. Elijah exhaled shakily. That was him, wasn't it? The brother? Yes, she said quietly. And he just confirmed everything. That evening, Ava found herself pacing the empty lobby long after everyone else had gone home. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark windows, tired, frightened, but alive. She thought of Richard, of how he'd looked at her when he said he wanted to help. Maybe he hadn't known how far his brother had gone. Maybe he had. Either way, she couldn't walk away now. She went back to the office, opened her laptop, and began drafting an email to Harper Lewis, an investigative journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. She attached the scanned documents, the payment logs, and a short message. There's something you need to see. Please meet me in person. Discretion is vital. Before hitting send. She hesitated. She imagined the look on Richard's face when he found out. The disappointment. The betrayal. But then she remembered the voice on the phone. The quiet threat. The warning. Her hand steadied. She pressed send. Outside. Thunder rolled again. Far away but moving closer. That night, she dreamed of water rising, flooding the hotel, swallowing the ledgers, washing away every trace of truth and lie alike. When she woke, the dream still clung to her skin like humidity. She looked out the window. The sky over New Orleans was bruised and heavy, waiting for another storm. But Ava didn't feel fear this time. She felt ready. The truth was coming, one way or another, and she would not run from it. The rain returned 2 days later, sweeping across New Orleans like a restless spirit. Streets glistened under the dim glow of lamplight, and thunder echoed somewhere far off, like a warning carried on the wind. Inside the Crescent Inn, the sound of water tapping against the windows blended with the low hum of the ceiling fan above Ava Johnson's desk. She hadn't slept properly in days. Each night brought more questions, and each morning brought new fear. But it wasn't just fear that kept her awake, it was anger. The kind that builds quietly until it hardens into resolve. The email to Harper Lewis had been sent. The journalist had replied within hours. Meet me tomorrow at noon. Small cafe on Dauphine Street. Bring what you have. Ava had read that message a dozen times, unsure whether to feel relief or dread. There was no turning back now. The front door creaked open. Elias stepped in, his hair damp from the rain. Morning. Miss Ava, he said, holding a steaming paper cup toward her. Coffee. Strongest they had. She smiled faintly. You're a lifesaver. He sat across from her, wiping rain from his jacket. So, you really gonna meet this reporter? I have to, she said. We can't fight this alone. He nodded slowly. I just hope you know what you're doing. People like Thomas Hale, they don't lose easy. Ava looked down at the ledger resting on the desk between them. I'm not trying to win. Elijah, I'm just trying to tell the truth. Before he could respond, the lobby phone rang sharply. Ava reached for it, half expecting another threat. Instead, a woman's voice spoke. Miss Johnson, this is Caroline from Mr. Hale's office. He'd like to see you immediately. It's urgent. Is something wrong? There was a pause. He didn't say, but he insists it can't wait. Ava glanced at Elijah, who was already shaking his head. Tell him I'll be there within the hour, she said, hanging up. You think that's smart? Elijah asked. Probably not, she said, standing. But I can't hide from this forever. She left the onion, the rain soaking through her coat as she hailed a cab. The driver didn't talk, and neither did she. Her reflection in the window looked older than she remembered. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, but alive. When the cab pulled up in front of the Hale Enterprises tower, the building looked colder than before. Its mirrored windows reflected the stormy sky, turning it into a wall of silver and glass. Caroline met her at the entrance, expression tight. He's in the private conference room, she said, leading Ava through quiet corridors lined with portraits of past executives. Richard was waiting by the window when she entered. He turned as she stepped in, his face pale, dark circles beneath his eyes. Ava, he said, voice low. Thank you for coming. You didn't give me much choice, she replied. He gestured toward a chair. Please, sit. I'll stand, she said. He sighed. You've always been stubborn. I've had to be, she answered. He ran a hand through his hair. I need to explain before you make this worse than it already is. Worse, Ava said, disbelief sharpening her voice. Your brother's been using your hotels to launder money. I'm the one who's been threatened, and you think I'm the one making it worse. Richard's eyes flashed with frustration. But there was pain there, too. You don't understand what you're up against. Thomas isn't just my brother. He has connections, politicians, bankers, people who'd bury this story before it ever saw daylight. Then why aren't you doing something? She asked. Because I've tried, he snapped, then lowered his voice. You think I haven't fought him? You think I haven't lost sleep over what he's done? But every time I get close, someone ends up hurt. My company, my family. It's all tangled in his lies. Ava's anger softened slightly, but only for a moment. So that's why you gave me the inn, to wash your hands of it. He didn't deny it. Richard, she said quietly, you can't fix corruption by passing it to someone else. You can't cleanse guilt by giving it a new owner. His eyes met hers, tired but sincere. Maybe not. But you did something I couldn't. You faced him. I didn't have a choice, she said. Exactly, he said softly. And that's what scares him. A knock interrupted them. The door opened. Caroline appeared, uneasy. Sir, your brother is here. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Richard straightened. Send him in. Ava's heart raced as Thomas Hale entered, his presence filling the space like smoke. He smiled, polite but cold. Well, he said, what a family reunion this is. His gaze slid to Ava. And Miss Johnson, always a pleasure. She held her ground. I thought you preferred calling from the shadows. He chuckled. I admire your courage. Misplaced, but admirable. Richard stepped between them. Thomas, this ends now. Thomas raised an eyebrow. N's little brother. This isn't a bedtime story you get to finish with a happy ending. You don't end power, you manage it. I've seen what your kind of management looks like, Richard said. You've bled our company dry. Thomas smiled. I've kept it alive. You were too weak to do what was necessary. Necessary, Ava said. You call stealing necessary. He turned to her, eyes gleaming. Stealing is such an ugly word. Let's call it balance. The rich get richer. The poor stay grateful. And the world keeps spinning. You're sick, she said. Maybe, he said with a shrug. But at least I understand how things work. You, on the other hand, you still think decency pays the bills. Ava took a step forward. Maybe it doesn't, but it lets me sleep at night. Thomas laughed softly, then looked at his brother. You really picked a troublesome one, didn't you? Richard's jaw tightened. Leave her out of this. Too late for that, Thomas said. He turned toward the door, then paused. I suggest you both stop playing detective, because next time, it won't be phone calls. It'll be headlines you don't like. And with that, he was gone. The silence that followed felt endless. Ava turned to Richard. He's threatening you, too. Isn't he? Richard nodded slowly. He's been threatening me for years. Then help me expose him. He looked torn. If I do, the company collapses. Thousands of jobs. My father's legacy gone. And if you don't, she asked. He hesitated. Then everything your father built becomes a lie, she said quietly. Richard looked down at the floor, shoulders slumping. You sound like him. You know. Maybe you just need someone to remind you what he stood for, she said. He let out a breath that sounded like surrender. Oh, what do you want me to do? Ava reached into her bag and placed a USB drive on his desk. Help me protect this. It's everything Elijah and I found. I've already sent copies to someone I trust. But if anything happens to me, I need you to make sure it doesn't disappear. He picked it up, weighing it in his hand like something fragile. You realize if this goes public, Thomas will go down and he'll take me with him. Maybe that's the price, she said. He studied her for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. All right, I'll help you. Ava exhaled slowly, the tension in her chest loosening just a little. As she turned to leave, Richard called out softly, Ava, be careful. He won't stop. She glanced back. Neither will I. Outside, the rain had begun again, heavier this time. She walked toward the street, pulling her coat tighter, her reflection shimmering in the puddles. The storm had deepened, both outside and within. But Ava didn't run from it. She walked straight into the rain, ready for whatever came next. The morning after the confrontation, the air over New Orleans felt thick and heavy, as if the storm had refused to leave. Clouds hung low above the rooftops, and a faint mist clung to the streets like smoke. Inside the Crescent Inn, Ava Johnson sat alone in the office, a mug of coffee growing cold beside her. The silence felt louder than usual. The ledger lay open in front of her, its pages now wrinkled from overuse. Each line of numbers felt like a thread in a net that had closed around her. She had thought the worst was behind her after facing Thomas Hale, but the calm only made her uneasy. Men like him didn't leave threats hanging. They acted. A knock at the door startled her. It was Maria, holding a brown envelope. This just came for you, the older woman said. A man dropped it off. Didn't give his name. Ava frowned, taking the envelope. It was sealed with wax old-fashioned, elegant, deliberate. She broke it open and unfolded the single sheet inside. There was no letterhead, no signature, just a line of neat handwriting. You have 3 days. Close your mouth, or we'll close your doors. Ava's stomach dropped. Her hands tightened on the paper. Maria saw her face pale. What is it? Nothing I didn't expect, Ava said quietly. She folded the note and slipped it into a drawer. Maria didn't press. She simply said, "Be careful, child. Sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's survival." But Ava had crossed the line where silence could protect her. There was no going back. That afternoon, she met Harper Lewis at the cafe on Dauphine Street. The journalist looked exactly as she'd imagined, sharp eyes behind thin glasses. Her notepad already open. "You must be Ava," Harper said, gesturing to the seat across from her. "I've read your email twice. I need you to tell me everything." Ava did. She started from the beginning, the night she found Richard in the rain, the gift of the hotel, the missing money, the shell companies, and finally, the threats. Harper listened without interrupting, her pen moving swiftly across the page. When Ava finished, the journalist leaned back. "You realize this story, if true, could blow up one of the biggest corporate names in the South." "I'm not doing this for a headline," Ava said. "I'm doing it because people like Thomas think no one will stand up to them." Harper smiled faintly. "You remind me of me 10 years ago. But stories like this don't just ruin reputations, they ruin lives. You're sure you want this out?" Ava nodded. "If I don't, he wins." Harper studied her for a long moment. "All right, I'll need evidence. Hard evidence. The kind no lawyer can bury. Get me that, and I'll publish." Ava promised she would. That night, back at the inn, she gathered Elijah and Maria in the office. The rain had returned, drumming gently against the windows. "I met the journalist," Ava said. "She'll help, but we need proof more than the invoices and ledgers." Elijah looked nervous. "What kind of proof? Emails? Transfers? Anything that connects Thomas Hale to the shell companies directly?" He hesitated. "That means breaking into the Hale Enterprises server." Maria's eyes widened. "Child, you can't. That's dangerous." Ava's voice was steady. "It's the only way." Elijah rubbed the back of his neck. "If they trace it." "They won't," she said. "We'll use the inn's old network. It's off the grid." Maria shook her head. "I don't like this. Ava, these people have money, power. They can make things disappear." "I know," Ava said softly. "That's what I'm afraid of, that they already have." Later that night, the office lights were dimmed, and the only sound was the tapping of keys as Elijah worked. Ava sat beside him, her heart pounding every time the progress bar on the screen moved forward. "Finally," Elijah whispered, "I'm in." Lines of code filled the monitor. He navigated quickly, eyes darting between folders. "Here, transaction archives. Wait." He clicked again. "There's something encrypted here. Private correspondence." "Can you open it?" Ava asked, trying. A second later, the screen flashed. A folder appeared. T. Hale Internal. Elijah opened one of the files. It was an email chain. Ava leaned closer, reading the words aloud. "Transfer approved. Crescent Inn account secure. Richard won't interfere. T. Hey." Her chest tightened. He knew. Richard knew about this. Elijah looked at her. "You sure it's him?" She didn't answer. The truth cut both ways. Thomas was corrupt, but Richard had played his part too. Maybe not as the villain, but as the coward who let it happen. "Download everything," she said. "We'll figure out the rest later." They stayed until nearly 3 a.m. When it was done, Elijah saved the files to a flash drive. There, enough to sink them both. Ava took the drive, slipping it into her coat pocket. "Thank you." As they left the office, lightning split the sky outside. Ava paused by the window, watching the rain pour down the glass. The world felt strange, like everything familiar had shifted. She whispered, "Once this comes out, nothing will be the same." Elijah nodded quietly. Maybe that's a good thing. The next morning, the headlines across the city read, "Rumors of financial misconduct in Hale Enterprises." Harper had moved fast. The story was out before Ava could second-guess herself. The article mentioned anonymous internal sources and possible embezzlement tied to subsidiary accounts. No names yet, but the fuse was lit. The inn's phone rang nonstop. Reporters, investors, curious locals. Maria shooed them away as best she could. Then came the call Ava had been dreading. "Ava." Richard's voice was tight. "What have you done?" "I told the truth," she said. "You don't understand. Thomas is furious. He knows it's you. I'm not hiding. You should," he said. "He's not bluffing anymore." She could hear it in his tone. Fear, guilt, and something else. Regret. "Then you'd better decide whose side you're on," she said, and hung up. Hours later, as dust settled over the city, the front doors of the Crescent Inn burst open. Thomas Hale walked in, flanked by two men in suits. Rain glistened on his shoulders. His smile was thin and sharp. "Evening." "Miss Johnson," he said calmly, "I must admit, you've caused quite a stir." Ava stood behind the counter. "I don't owe you an apology." "Of course not," he said. "You owe me something, much greater silence." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You've made a mistake, dragging my brother's name into this. He can't protect you anymore." "I don't need his protection," she said. Thomas tilted his head. "You think courage will save you? Courage gets you noticed, and people who get noticed." He smiled coldly. "They disappear." Before she could respond, he turned and walked out, his bodyguards following. The heavy doors closed behind them with a final, echoing thud. Ava stood still, her heart racing. For the first time, she felt real fear not for herself, but for the people around her. When Maria came out from the hallway, she saw Ava's pale face and whispered, "He was here, wasn't he?" Ava nodded. Maria crossed herself. "Lord help you, child." Ava stared at the rain streaking down the windows. "He's not going to scare me away," she said softly. "Not anymore. That night." She sat in her office long after everyone had gone home, the flash drive lying on the desk beside her. The storm outside raged louder, wind rattling the glass. Her phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. "You've chosen your side. Don't expect mercy." Ava deleted it, leaned back in her chair, and whispered to the dark room, "I wasn't asking for mercy." She didn't notice the faint movement outside the window, a shadow watching her from across the street. The storm that had hung over New Orleans finally broke in full. Wind lashed against the windows of the Crescent Inn, and rain poured down in sheets so heavy the streetlights blurred into smudges of gold. Inside, Ava Johnson sat by the lobby fireplace, the flames casting soft, trembling shadows across her face. She hadn't slept in 2 nights. The threats were getting worse. Messages slipped under her door. Calls that ended in silence. Headlights lingering outside her building long after midnight. The police had taken a report, but offered little comfort. Without proof of intent, "Ma'am, there's not much we can do." They'd said, "Proof. Always proof." Elijah entered quietly, a stack of folders in his arms. His eyes were tired, but his resolve hadn't faltered. "I've been digging," he said. "Thomas's people are moving money out of state. Offshore accounts, maybe. He's cleaning house before this thing explodes." Ava stared into the fire. "So, he knows it's over." Elijah sat down across from her. "Or he's getting ready to fight back." She sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "Harper says the story's picking up traction. Investors are panicking. Richard's board is calling emergency meetings. That good or bad both?" For a long moment, they sat in silence, listening to the rain hammer the roof. Ava's thoughts wandered back to Richard. He hadn't called since their last conversation. She didn't know if that meant he was helping or hiding. "Finally," she said softly, "you know what scares me most. Not the threats. It's realizing how easy it is for people like them to twist the truth. How the world bends around money." Elijah nodded. "That's why people like you matter." She gave a small, tired smile. "I'm not sure I'm changing anything." "You are," he said, "even if no one sees it yet." Before Ava could reply, the front door opened. Maria stepped inside, dripping from the rain, holding a grocery bag. "The power company says the lines are unstable," she said. "Might go out before morning." "Great," Ava muttered. "Just what we need." Maria set down the bag and looked at her closely. "You look worn out, child. You should rest." "I can't," Ava said. "Not now." Maria's tone softened. "You can't fight every battle in one night. Even storms pass. Eventually." Ava smiled faintly. "This one's not passing on its own." Maria reached out and squeezed her shoulder. "Then make sure it doesn't take you with it." That night, the inn lost power, just as Maria had predicted. The lights flickered once, twice, then went dark. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The only glow came from the dying fire. Ava lit a candle and went to her office. The old building groaned in the wind, the storm rattling the glass panes. She sat down, opened her notebook, and began writing again. Not numbers this time, but thoughts, a confession of sorts. She wrote about the night she met Richard, about the rain-soaked streets and the man who seemed lost in his own wealth. She wrote about the first time she saw the Crescent Inn and how, despite its decay, it had felt alive. She wrote about the people, the guests, Maria, Elijah, and how this place had become more than just walls and windows. It was a promise that decency still mattered. But as her pen moved across the page, her chest tightened. She realized that, somewhere along the way, her fight had changed. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about survival. The wind howled louder, shaking the shutters. Ava blew out the candle and listened. Somewhere in the hall, a floorboard creaked. She froze. "Maria," she called softly. No answer. Then she heard it again, a slow, deliberate step. Her heartbeat quickened. She reached for the small flashlight on her desk and turned it on. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on the hallway door. She stood, moving quietly, her shoes soundless on the old floor. When she stepped into the hall, the light caught movement near the end, someone slipping into the stairwell. "Hey!" she shouted, running forward. But by the time she reached the stairs, the door was swinging open into the storm. She caught only a glimpse of a black raincoat disappearing into the night. She ran outside, rain drenching her instantly. "Stop," she cried, but the figure was gone, swallowed by the darkness. When she returned inside, Elijah was in the lobby, flashlight in hand. "What happened?" "Someone was here," she said, breathless, inside the building. His eyes widened. "You sure?" She nodded. They left the side door open. Elijah rushed to check it, then locked it tight. "We need to call the cops again. They won't come in time," Ava said, shivering. They searched the building room by room. In one of the maintenance closets, they found a small camera mounted high in the corner. New, sleek, not part of the inn's old security system. Elijah climbed up and removed it carefully. "This isn't ours," he said. Ava felt her stomach twist. "Then whose is it?" They examined the device by candlelight. No logo, no serial number. But inside the casing was a small transmitter, active. "He's been watching us," Ava whispered. "Thomas." Elijah looked pale. "We have to get out of here." "Not yet," she said. "If we leave, he wins. But if we stay, I'm not running from him." Before he could argue, her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "I warned you." A second later, another text arrived, a photo of the inn's lobby, taken from outside the window. The timestamp was current. "He's here," she breathed. Elijah looked at her, fear flashing in his eyes. "We need to go. Now." Ava grabbed the flash drive from her desk and stuffed it into her pocket. "Take Maria and get her somewhere safe," she said. "What about you? I'll buy you time." "No," he said firmly. "I'm not leaving you here." But Ava's voice was steady. "Certain. Elijah, go." He hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "You'd better come back." As he ran down the hall to find Maria, Ava turned off her flashlight and moved toward the lobby. The storm outside raged, wind screaming through the cracks in the walls. She crouched behind the counter, heart hammering. The front door creaked slowly, as if pushed open by an invisible hand. Then a shadow stepped inside. The figure moved with quiet confidence, scanning the room. Lightning flashed outside, and for a brief instant, she saw his face, one of Thomas's men, the same one who'd stood behind him at the office. He held a gun. Ava's mind raced. She reached into the drawer behind the counter and grabbed the heavy metal flashlight. Her hands were shaking, but she tightened her grip. The man took another step forward. "Miss Johnson," he called softly. "Mr. Hale wants a word." She didn't answer. He moved closer. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." When he stepped within reach, she swung the flashlight as hard as she could. It connected with his arm, and he stumbled with a curse, the gun clattering to the floor. Ava darted for the side door, heart pounding. Rain blasted her face as she ran into the storm, her breath coming in sharp bursts. Behind her, she heard the man shouting, footsteps splashing in pursuit. She didn't look back. She turned down an alley, slipping on wet pavement, but catching herself. Somewhere nearby, sirens wailed faintly. She ran until her lungs burned, until she found a corner cafe with its lights still on. She pushed through the door, gasping for air. The barista looked up, startled. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Ava leaned against the counter, drenched and trembling. "Call the police," she said. "Please, tell them it's about Thomas Hale." As the barista grabbed the phone, Ava sank into a chair, her whole body shaking. The storm howled outside, but inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in days. Defiance. They wanted her silent. She was done being silent. Whatever it took. She was going to finish this. By dawn, the storm had finally broken. The air over New Orleans hung heavy and still, as if the city itself was holding its breath. The streets shimmered under the pale morning light, littered with fallen branches and puddles that mirrored the clouds. Inside the small cafe on Chartres Street, Ava Johnson sat wrapped in a borrowed blanket, her hair still damp, her eyes wide from a sleepless night. Two police officers stood nearby, murmuring quietly. They'd taken her statement about the break-in, the threats, the man who'd followed her, but she could tell from their expressions that they didn't quite believe her. When they finally left, the young barista refilled her coffee and said softly, "You sure you don't want me to call someone?" Ava shook her head. "No, thank you." The moment he stepped away, she pulled out her phone. Dozens of missed calls, one from Harper Lewis. She called back immediately. The journalist's voice crackled through the line, sharp and urgent. "Ava, are you safe barely?" Ava said. "One of Thomas's men tried to break in last night." "Jesus," Harper muttered. "Listen to me. The story's blown up. National outlets have picked it up. The FBI's already sniffing around the financial reports. You need to stay somewhere secure." Ava closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. "It's happening then. It's happening," Harper confirmed. "You did it, Ava. You actually did it." Ava smiled faintly. "Not yet. Thomas won't go quietly." "You're right," Harper said. "And that's what scares me. Stay in touch. I'll send someone to watch your place." After hanging up, Ava stared at her reflection in the cafe window. The woman staring back looked older, tougher, and somehow sadder. She wondered when exactly the waitress she used to be had disappeared and who this person was that had taken her place. By the time she returned to the Crescent Inn, Elijah was waiting for her at the door. His face lit up with relief. "You're okay," he said, pulling her into a quick, tight hug. "I'm okay," she said softly, "but we need to move fast." He led her inside. "You should see this." He turned on the TV in the lobby. The morning news was running a live broadcast federal investigation launched into Hale Enterprises. Sources confirm evidence of financial misconduct. Richard Hale's photo flashed on the screen beside Thomas's. Two brothers now tied together by headlines that screamed betrayal and greed. Ava sank into a chair. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Elijah turned down the volume. "You think they'll arrest him?" "Which one?" she asked. He hesitated. "Both." She shook her head slowly. "Thomas, yes. Richard, I don't know. He's guilty, but not like his brother," as if summoned by her thoughts. The phone on the counter rang. Elijah answered, then handed it to her. "It's him," he said quietly. Ava hesitated, then pressed the receiver to her ear. "Richard." His voice sounded strained, distant. "They're coming for him. Ava, the feds raided one of our offices this morning. Thomas is furious. He's saying it's all a setup. And you," she asked, "what are you saying?" "I'm saying he deserves it," Richard said. "But I'm not blind. I know I deserve some of it, too." Ava said nothing. "I'm going to turn over everything I have," he continued. "Emails, contracts, offshore ledgers. I should have done it sooner. I just didn't want to believe my own brother could do this." "It's not too late," she said quietly. He let out a broken laugh. "For you, maybe. For me, it's been too late for a long time." Before she could respond, the line went dead. That evening, the Crescent Inn was surrounded by news vans. Reporters crowded the sidewalk, shouting questions through the rain. Ava refused interviews. She wasn't the story, at least. She didn't want to be. But her name had already leaked. The black waitress who became the whistleblower. Maria watched from behind the curtain, shaking her head. "You never asked for this." "No," Ava said. "But maybe it was waiting for me." "Child," Maria said softly, "you've stirred the world, but don't let it swallow you." "I won't," Ava promised. Later that night, Harper came by in person, her notebook tucked under her arm, her eyes alive with adrenaline. "The FBI's building a case," she said, dropping into a chair. "Richard's cooperating. Thomas is in hiding. You've got them cornered." Ava leaned against the counter, exhausted. Cornered men bite hardest. Harper nodded. "That's why I brought this." She slid a document across the table. "Your official statement draft. I'll publish it when you're ready." Ava scanned it. The words were clean, factual, careful, but it didn't sound like her. "No," she said, shaking her head. "If I speak in my own voice." "Then what do you want to say?" Harper asked. Ava looked out at the rain-soaked street beyond the window. "That people like Thomas Hale think the world belongs to them. They build their towers on the backs of the people they think don't matter. But every tower has a foundation, and when that foundation cracks, everything falls." Harper smiled. "Now that's a headline." Before leaving, Harper paused at the door. "You know, Ava, you didn't just expose a crime. You reminded people what courage looks like." Ava watched her go, unsure whether to feel proud or terrified. The next morning, she received another call, this time from an unfamiliar number. When she answered, a rough voice said, "He's gone." "Who, Thomas Hale?" "They found him in his penthouse. Self-inflicted gunshot." Ava froze, unable to speak. The man on the line continued, "The feds are locking down the assets. You should be safe now." She hung up slowly, her hand trembling. Safe. The word felt hollow. Later that day, Richard appeared at the inn. He looked nothing like the man she'd first met. His suit was rumpled, his eyes sunken, his expression haunted. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before saying, "It's over." "Is it?" Ava asked quietly. He nodded. Stepping inside, "Thomas is dead. The company's under federal control. I'm resigning. I've already confessed to my part. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to hear it from me," he said, "and because I wanted to thank you for not letting me hide behind excuses anymore." Ava looked at him, unsure what to feel. Pity, relief. Maybe both. "What will you do now?" He gave a faint, weary smile. "Maybe start over. Build something honest this time." He extended an envelope toward her. "One last thing. I've transferred full ownership of the Crescent Inn to your name. No strings attached this time. It's truly yours." She hesitated before taking it. "You didn't have to." "I did," he said softly. "Because this place deserves someone who'll care for it. Someone better than me." She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. When he left, she stood alone in the empty lobby. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. Sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks, spilling across the worn tile floor. Maria entered quietly, drying her hands with a towel. "What did he say?" Ava smiled faintly. "He said it's mine." Maria chuckled. "Guess the world's been strange sometimes." Ava looked around the lobby, the faded wallpaper, the squeaky fan, the smell of old wood, and for the first time, she didn't see decay. She saw roots. She walked to the front window and opened it wide. Fresh air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and jasmine from the street. It was over. The giants had fallen. But what remained, what she had built through fear, truth, and defiance, was something no one could take from her again. A week after Thomas Hale's death, New Orleans began to exhale. The chaos that had filled the streets, reporters, police, flashing lights, slowly faded into something quieter, almost reverent. The Crescent Inn stood steady at the corner of Esplanade Avenue. its old walls finally at peace after months of tension and fear. Inside, the morning light poured through the front windows, golden and soft, falling across the worn tile and the wooden counter where Ava Johnson stood. She was still getting used to the silence. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes from emptiness. It was the kind that follows a storm, when the air is clear and heavy at once. Maria entered with a tray of freshly brewed coffee, humming an old gospel tune. "Morning, baby," she said warmly. "You slept." Ava smiled faintly. A little. Still feels strange. Waking up without waiting for the next disaster. Maria set down the tray and gave her a knowing look. That's what peace feels like at first strange. You've been fighting so long, you forgot how to rest. Ava wrapped her hands around a warm cup. Maybe, but part of me doesn't trust it yet. Every time I hear a car outside, I still expect trouble. Trouble don't stay forever, Maria said. Storms pass, and what's left is what you build after. Ava looked around the lobby. The place needed work peeling wallpaper, a broken light fixture, water stains on the ceiling, but for the first time, she didn't see the flaws as burdens. She saw them as a beginning. Later that morning, Elijah arrived, his energy bright and hopeful as always. Guess what he said, grinning? "I found a contractor willing to fix the roof for cheap. He's a friend of my uncle's. Says he can start next week." "That's great," Ava said, smiling for real this time. "Maybe we'll finally keep the rain outside, where it belongs." Elijah chuckled. "And I was thinking maybe we should do a reopening, a fresh start for the inn." Maria clapped her hands together. "Lord, yes, invite the neighborhood. Make it something good. This place deserves laughter again." Ava hesitated. "A reopening." "Why not?" Elijah said. "You've got a story now. People will come just to see the woman who took on the Hales and won." "I didn't win," Ava said softly. "I just survived." Maria touched her shoulder. "Sometimes that's the biggest victory of all." Ava smiled, a quiet warmth blooming in her chest. "All right," she said. "Let's do it." For the next few days, they worked tirelessly. Maria scrubbed every inch of the floors, humming while she worked. Elijah painted the front doors a deep shade of blue. Ava ordered new linens, polished the old wooden bar, and repaired the flickering sign outside. Each stroke of paint, each nail hammered into place felt symbolic, as if they weren't just fixing a building, but reclaiming something deeper: dignity, hope, and the simple joy of belonging. On the morning of the reopening, the sky was clear and wide. The air carried the smell of coffee, beignets, and blooming magnolia trees. Locals gathered outside, curious and smiling. Some had read about Ava in the papers. Others had just seen the lights return to a place that had been dark for too long. Ava stood at the entrance, wearing a simple white blouse and her old server's apron, a nod to where it all began. Harper Lewis arrived, camera crew in tow, her usual sharp professionalism softened by genuine pride. "I told you the world would remember your name," Harper said with a grin. "I didn't want them to," Ava replied, "but I'm glad they remember the truth." Harper nodded. "You gave people something to believe in. That matters." As guests began filling the lobby, Ava moved among them, shaking hands, answering questions, and laughing more freely than she had in months. She spotted familiar faces, neighbors who'd once walked by without a glance, now looking at her with admiration. At one point, she caught sight of a man standing near the doorway, slightly apart from the crowd. He wasn't dressed in a suit, but in a simple gray sweater and jeans. When he met her gaze, she recognized him immediately. Richard Hale. He approached slowly, his expression hesitant but sincere. "I didn't think you'd want to see me," he said quietly. "I didn't," Ava replied, then added gently, "But I'm glad you came." He nodded, looking around the lobby. "You've done something beautiful here. My father would have been proud." Ava studied him. "Are you staying in town for a while?" he said. "I'm helping the authorities tie up what's left of the company. After that, I don't know. Maybe I'll disappear for a bit. Try to figure out who I am without all of this. Sometimes disappearing is the only way to start over," she said. He smiled faintly. "You always seem to know what to say. I've had practice." They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of laughter and music filling the air around them. Finally, Richard extended his hand. "Thank you for everything." Ava shook it. "Take care of yourself." "Richard?" He nodded, then turned and walked out into the sunlight, disappearing into the crowd. Later that evening, as the last guest drifted away and the lights dimmed, Ava stood alone in the lobby. The place felt alive again, filled with echoes of laughter and the faint scent of food and flowers. Maria joined her, wiping her hands on her apron. "You did good, child," she said softly. "You gave this place its heart back." Ava looked toward the front window, where the city lights shimmered beyond the glass. "We did it. Maria. All of us." Elijah came down the stairs, carrying a stack of empty trays. "You know, Miss Ava," he said, grinning, "if you ever need a manager, I'm your guy." She laughed. "A sound light and real? Don't tempt me. I might just take you up on that." He smiled. "I hope you do." As the two of them left for the night, Ava lingered by the window. The moon hung over the French Quarter, silver and calm. The city, once wild and heavy with fear, now felt open again. She thought about everything: the betrayal, the danger, the loss, and realized something simple. She wasn't defined by what she'd endured. She was defined by what she'd chosen to become after: a survivor, a builder, a believer. The old neon sign outside flickered to life, casting a soft blue glow that reflected in her eyes. "The Crescent Inn," it read, shining brighter than it had in years. Ava whispered to herself, "Welcome home." And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, she truly felt it. Autumn drifted softly into New Orleans, carrying with it the smell of rain and sweet olive trees. The Crescent Inn was alive again. Bookings were steady. Laughter filled the halls, and the piano in the lounge played each night under the amber glow of the chandeliers. Guests came not just for the rooms, but for the story, the one about a young black waitress who had stood up to power and won. But for Ava Johnson, peace had always been a fragile thing. Some nights, when the inn was quiet and the city's jazz softened into the distance, the memories came back: the fear, the threats, the long nights waiting for the knock on the door. She'd tell herself it was over, yet deep inside, the echoes still stirred. One crisp evening, as she checked the front ledger, Elijah came running in from the street. His cheeks were flushed from the wind. "Miss Ava, you'll never guess who's outside." She raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" He grinned. "No, ma'am. Not unless you're scared of ghosts." Before she could ask, the door opened and in walked a man she hadn't seen in years. "David," she whispered. David Carter, her childhood friend. The boy who used to sneak her beignets behind Miss Lula's diner. The one who'd left for Chicago chasing big dreams. He looked older now, with faint lines near his eyes and the kind of confidence born from surviving the world. "Hey, Ava," he said softly. "Didn't think I'd find you running a hotel." Ava laughed, surprised at how easily his voice melted the tension in her shoulders. Didn't think I'd be running one either. Maria peeked from behind the counter and smiled knowingly. Well, look who came back from the dead. Lord, child, it's been forever. David smiled politely. Too long. I had to see it with my own eyes. The Crescent Inn. Everyone up north talking about you. Good things, I hope, Ava said. The best things, he replied. They sat in the lounge, the sound of rain pattering gently against the window. He told her about his years working in community housing, helping rebuild after hurricanes, and the small nonprofit he'd started for displaced families. And you, he said finally, you took down billionaires. Ava smiled faintly. I didn't take them down. The truth did. He studied her face for a long moment. Still carrying it, though, aren't you? What the weight? You've always carried other people's pain like it was yours. She hesitated, then said quietly, Someone has to. He smiled sadly. Not always. Sometimes, you've got to let the world heal itself. Their conversation stretched deep into the night, filled with laughter and silences that felt like memory. When he finally stood to leave, he said, You ever think about doing more with this place? More, she asked. Yeah. This inn, it could be more than a hotel. You could make it a refuge for people who need a second chance, kind of like you got. Ava looked around the room. The idea planted itself quietly in her chest. I'll think about it, she said. The next morning, she couldn't stop thinking about it. As she walked through the halls past the polished banisters, the smell of fresh coffee, the sound of Maria humming, she imagined the rooms filled not just with guests but with people rebuilding their lives. Later that day, Harper Lewis stopped by for coffee, notebook in hand. You've been quiet lately, she said. Usually that means you're about to do something interesting. Ava laughed. Maybe. I've been thinking about opening part of the inn for transitional housing. Just a few rooms. Nothing fancy. Harper's eyes lit up. That's a hell of a follow-up to your story. From whistleblower to community builder. I don't want it to be about me, Ava said. I want it to be about what comes next. About giving people what I wished I'd had somewhere safe. That's going to take funding, Harper said. I know someone who might help, Ava replied, thinking of David. And so, it began again, not as a fight this time, but as a mission. Ava and David worked side by side for weeks, applying for grants, fixing old rooms, and organizing community events. Elijah painted murals on the walls, each one telling a small story of survival and renewal. Maria cooked for volunteers, her laughter filling every corner. One night, while they were locking up, David lingered by the door. You ever wonder, he said quietly, what your life would have been like if none of this had happened? Ava thought for a moment. Sometimes, but then I realize I wouldn't trade it. Pain teaches you things peace never could. He nodded, looking at her with something warm and unspoken in his eyes. You always had that fire, Ava. She smiled. Maybe now I can use it to light something good. Weeks turned into months. The project took root. Families who had lost everything found shelter at the Crescent Inn. Women escaping violence. Young men seeking a fresh start all found a home there. The building that once carried fear now carried hope. One afternoon, as Ava walked through the courtyard, she saw a little girl chasing a paper butterfly in the sunlight. Her laughter filled the air, bright and pure. Ava stopped, her throat tightening. For the first time in a long while, she realized this was what healing looked like. Later that evening, she sat by the window in her office, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She took out her old journal, the same one she'd written in during the darkest nights. On the last page, she wrote, "Maybe we don't heal by forgetting the past. Maybe we heal by building something beautiful beside it." When she looked up, David was standing at the doorway. "That's a good line," he said. "You should put it on the wall." "Maybe I will," she said with a smile. He stepped closer. "You've turned this place into something alive again. You've turned pain into purpose." Ava closed her journal. "It wasn't just me." "No," he said, "but it started with you. Outside." The lamps flickered on one by one, bathing the street in warm light. The Crescent Inn stood tall against the twilight, a quiet beacon for those who had lost their way. And Ava Johnson, the woman who once thought the world had forgotten her, realized something simple but profound. She hadn't been broken by the past. She had been remade by it. Winter came quietly to New Orleans. The air was cooler now, crisp with the scent of pine and distant bonfires. The Crescent Inn glowed softly against the dusk, its windows warm with light and laughter. Ava Johnson stood on the balcony outside her office, wrapped in a wool shawl, looking down at the courtyard below. Children were decorating a small Christmas tree that Elijah had dragged in earlier that day. Maria supervised from a rocking chair, calling out instructions with her usual authority. "Don't tangle them lights, child." That's how fires start while David helped string garlands along the fence. It was a simple scene, yet Ava felt something stir deep inside her. Months ago, this courtyard had been filled with fear. Now it brimmed with joy. The Crescent Inn wasn't just a building anymore. It was a heartbeat. David looked up and caught her watching. "You're supposed to be on a break," he called, grinning. "I'm supervising," Ava replied. "You're terrible at that," he teased. "Come down here before Maria puts me to work stringing popcorn." She laughed, descending the stairs. The chill in the air bit gently at her skin, but it didn't bother her. The laughter around her was warmth enough. As she reached the courtyard, Maria handed her a mug of hot cocoa. "Sit a minute," she said. "You've earned it." Ava sat beside her, sipping quietly. The lights reflected in her cup, small golden dots that shimmered like memories. "You've done something good here, baby," Maria said softly. "But I see that look in your eyes. You still waiting for the next storm." Ava smiled faintly. "Maybe. I don't know if people like me ever stop waiting." Maria patted her hand. "Then maybe it's time to learn how to live in the calm." Before Ava could answer, David approached, brushing sawdust from his hands. "We need a star for the top," he said. "I was thinking we make one. Something original." "Original?" Aaliyah asked, like what David thought for a moment. "Something that means hope." Ava looked up at the bare tree, the lights twinkling softly against the night. "How about we use the old brass pendant from the lobby lamp? It's been sitting in storage for months." "Perfect," David said. When the star was placed, everyone stepped back. It wasn't perfect. It was uneven, tarnished in places, but when the lights hit it, it shimmered with quiet dignity. Ava couldn't take her eyes off it. It felt like a reflection of her own journey, flawed, scarred, but still shining. Later, after the children were asleep and the courtyard emptied, Ava and David stayed outside. The city hummed in the distance, and the Mississippi glimmered faintly beyond the rooftops. He handed her a cup of coffee and said, "You ever think about what's next?" Ava looked at him curiously. "Next?" "Yeah," he said. "This place is running strong. You've built something that'll last. Maybe it's time to think about what comes after. She smiled. You mean a vacation? He chuckled. Maybe something bigger. You could start another center somewhere. Or tell your story. There are people who'd listen. Ava. People who need to. Ava stared into her coffee. I don't know if I'm ready to relive it. Maybe that's not the point, David said. Maybe it's not about reliving it. It's about showing people that it's possible to come out the other side. She didn't answer. The thought scared her, but it also lit something inside. When he left for the night, she stayed by the tree, the brass star glinting faintly above her. She thought of the countless faces that had passed through the Crescent Inn, mothers clutching children, veterans with haunted eyes, young women starting over. She realized that every single one of them carried a piece of her story. A few days later, Harper Lewis called. Ava, she said, I've been approached by a publisher. They want to do a feature on you, your story, your work with the inn, everything. Ava hesitated. I don't want to turn this into a spectacle. Harper. It won't be, Harper said. Not if we tell it your way. This isn't about fame. It's about truth, about hope. Ava looked around the lobby. Children's drawings lined the walls, and the faint sound of music floated down the hall. Let me think about it, she said finally. That night, as she was closing the front desk, Elijah rushed in with a letter in his hand. Miss Ava, this came for you. She opened it carefully. It was from Richard Hale. The handwriting was familiar, but steadier now. Ava. It's been months since we last spoke. I wanted you to know I've been rebuilding quietly this time. I sold what was left of the company and used the money to start a scholarship fund for hospitality workers. It's called the Johnson Foundation. I hope that's all right. You showed me what real integrity looks like. Thank you for saving not just a hotel, but a man's soul. Richard Ava's eyes misted. She folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her journal. He's trying, she whispered. Maria, who had been standing nearby, nodded approvingly. Redemption comes in funny shapes, child. In the following weeks, the inn grew busier. Donations poured in after Harper's latest article. The new outreach wing was named the Morning Room, a place for anyone who needed a fresh start. Ava threw herself into the work, mentoring, listening, building. One evening, after the guests had gone to bed, she stood in the courtyard again. The air was cool, and the lights from the city shimmered across the rooftops. She thought of her past, the waitress in a dim bar, the night she helped a stranger home, the chaos that followed, and realized it had all led here. David stepped out beside her. You're thinking again, he said. Always? She smiled. He looked at her for a long moment. You know, he said softly, sometimes I think that light you keep chasing, it's not out there somewhere. It's you. Ava laughed quietly. Don't get poetic on me. David. He smiled. Too late. They stood in silence, side by side, watching as the brass star on the courtyard tree flickered gently in the wind. Ava finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I used to think I was just surviving, but maybe I've been learning how to live. Yeah, David said, and you're teaching the rest of us how to do it, too. As the night deepened, the lights of the Crescent Inn glowed against the darkness like a promise soft, enduring, unbroken. The world outside would change again. Storms would come and go. But here, in this small corner of the city, a light would always remain. The first light of spring spilled over New Orleans like a blessing. The city woke slowly, the air alive with the scent of wet magnolia leaves and distant saxophones. The Crescent Inn stood quietly on its corner, the morning sun washing its old brick walls in gold. Inside, the soft hum of life stirred the clatter of cups, Maria's voice calling orders from the kitchen, and Elijah's laughter echoing down the hall. Ava Johnson sat by the window of her office, pen in hand, finishing a letter that had taken her weeks to write. To anyone who's ever felt unseen, unwanted, or unworthy, this place is yours. The Crescent Inn isn't just a building. It's a reminder that no matter how dark the night, there's always light waiting to be found. Sometimes, we don't need to be rescued. We just need to be believed in. Welcome home. She read it twice before setting the pen down. Her hands trembled slightly, not from doubt, but from the quiet weight of everything that had brought her here. There was a soft knock on the door. David Carter stepped in, carrying a small potted plant wrapped in brown paper. "For the grand opening of the morning room," he said with a grin. Ava smiled. "Another one. That makes 12. "Hey," he said, shrugging. "Can't have too much life around here." She stood, taking the plant from him. It was a tiny fig tree, its green leaves vibrant and full. "It's perfect," she said softly. He leaned against the doorway, studying her. "You look peaceful." "I feel it," she said, "for the first time in a long while." He smiled, that quiet, knowing smile she'd come to love. "You've earned it." As the day unfolded, people from all over the city began to gather at the inn. The morning room, the new community wing, was ready. Harper Lewis was there with her camera crew, capturing it all. Children played in the courtyard, the brass star from Christmas still hanging in the window, now polished to a bright gleam. Maria wore her Sunday best, bustling around with pride. "I told you, baby," she whispered to Ava, "you'd turn pain into purpose." When it was time to speak, Ava stepped to the front. The crowd quieted. She looked out and saw faces familiar and new, people who had once needed shelter, others who had come to help. Her heart swelled. "I used to think the world was divided." She began, that there were people who had power and people who didn't. But life has taught me that strength doesn't always come from where we expect it. Sometimes it's the quiet ones, the overlooked, the forgotten who carry the kind of courage that changes everything. She paused, letting the words breathe. This inn has been through storms, inside and out. But every time the wind tried to tear it down, someone was there to hold it together. That's what this place stands for. Hope that refuses to give up. The crowd erupted in applause, but Ava's eyes found David's. He nodded softly, pride shining in his gaze. After the ceremony, Harper approached her with tears in her eyes. That was beautiful. "Ava, the world needed to hear it." Ava smiled. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." "Always," Harper said, embracing her before heading off to interview guests. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, Ava found herself on the balcony overlooking the courtyard. The sounds of jazz drifted up from a nearby bar. Below, the lights of the Crescent Inn flickered softly like fireflies. David joined her, hands in his pockets. "You know," he said, "when I first came back, I thought you'd already built your dream, but now I see you were still building it." Ava leaned on the railing, watching the last glow of sunset fade. "Maybe dreams don't finish," she said. "Maybe they just change shape." He chuckled. "You sound like Maria." "She's rubbing off on me." They stood there quietly for a while. The night settled gently around them. David turned toward her. "Ava, there's something I've been meaning to tell you." She looked at him, curious. "I'm leaving," he said softly. "There's a new housing project starting in Baton Rouge. They asked me to lead it. It's a chance to help more people. But, he hesitated, it means I won't be here. Ava's heart clenched. When next month? She forced a small smile. That's amazing. David, they're lucky to have you. He stepped closer. I wouldn't have said yes without you. You reminded me what purpose feels like. Her throat tightened. You don't need me for that. Maybe not, he said, his voice gentle. But I'll miss you anyway. She met his gaze, and for a moment, everything else faded the years. The storms, the scars. Just two people who had carried each other through the wreckage. He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. You'll be okay, I'll be home, she said quietly. When he left that night, she didn't cry. Instead, she sat alone in the courtyard, the brass star above her reflecting the moonlight. She thought about how far she'd come from a waitress cleaning spilled drinks to a woman who had rebuilt not just a building, but an entire community. The next morning, she woke early. The city was wrapped in fog, the streets damp and quiet. She made a pot of coffee and took it outside. Sitting on the front steps of the inn, the world felt still, like it was holding its breath. Maria joined her a few minutes later, sitting down with a sigh. You look thoughtful, baby. Ava smiled softly. Just grateful. Maria nodded. Grateful's a good place to be. They sat in silence for a while, sipping their coffee, watching the fog lift slowly off the street. Finally, Maria said, You know, this place will outlive us all. And that's a beautiful thing. Ava looked at the sign above the door. The Crescent Inn is paint-worn but proud. It already has, she whispered. By noon. The fog had cleared completely, and sunlight flooded the courtyard. Children played again, laughter echoing off the walls. Ava stood at the window of her office, watching them. Her eyes drifted to the framed newspaper clipping on the wall, the waitress who changed everything. She smiled and shook her head. No, she murmured. The people did. A knock sounded at the door. It was Elijah, holding a clipboard. Miss Ava, we got 3 new families checking in today, and one of them brought you something. He handed her a small box. Inside was a brass key, polished and shining. Attached was a note in familiar handwriting. For the woman who turned a key into a kingdom. Thank you for teaching me what home means. Ava pressed the key to her chest, closing her eyes. That night, as the city came alive with music and light, the Crescent Inn glowed brighter than ever, and inside, Ava Johnson stood behind the counter, greeting guests with the same warmth she'd once offered strangers in a crowded bar. But now, she wasn't just serving coffee or finding rooms. She was offering something greater, belonging. Because home, she had learned, wasn't a place you find. It was something you build, piece by piece, heart by heart, until it becomes part of you. And for Ava Johnson, the Crescent Inn wasn't just her home. It was her legacy, a light that would never fade. In the end, Ava Johnson's story isn't just about luck or destiny. It's about the quiet courage to do what's right when no one is watching. Her journey teaches us that kindness is not weakness. It's strength wrapped in grace. Ava didn't fight for power or money. She fought to protect her heart, her dignity, and her belief that doing good still matters. For those who have lived long enough to see both the beauty and the cruelty of life, her story is a whisper of hope. It's never too late to start again. No matter where you've been or how broken you feel, there's always a path back to light. The Crescent Inn may have been built from brick and wood, but its true foundation is faith, the kind that says, I will rise again, no matter what. So, as you finish this story, remember sometimes, the greatest victories are not loud. They're the quiet ones that happen inside our hearts. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for believing. If this story touched something deep within you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Because somewhere out there, someone needs this reminder. You are never too small to make a difference.